World's biggest oil producers. Discover the world's top oil-producing countries of 2020. In this article, you will learn more about the oil industry and find out how to get exposure to the commodity with IG. This list shows the amount of barrels per day, BPD, produced per country as at June 25, 2020. Oil production figures change regularly. Source: EIA. The top 10 biggest oil producers supply 71% of the world's oil, which is more than 100 million barrels per day. The oil is mainly used in transportation, petrol and diesel, but it also supports the production of certain lubricants, plastics, and pharmaceuticals. Top oil-producing countries. 1. United States 19%. 2. Saudi Arabia 12%. 3. Russia 11%. 4. Canada 5%. 5. China 5%. 6. Iraq 5%. 7. United Arab Emirates 4%. 8. Brazil 4%. 9. Iran 3%. 10. Kuwait 3%. 1. United States. 19.51 million BPD. The United States has been the top oil-producing country in the world since 2017. Here, oil is produced in 32 states and in U.S. coastal waters, the majority of which is drilled in Texas, 41%. The country is also the biggest consumer of oil, using a total of 7.47 billion barrels of oil in 2019. One of the main reasons why the U.S. is a leader in oil production is because it was the first country to adopt new methods of drilling. Rigs can now drill horizontally, enabling greater access to oil-yielding rock. Between 2018 and 2019, oil production in the U.S. increased by just over 9%. 2. Saudi Arabia. 11.81 million BPD. Before the U.S. became the world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia held the top spot for a few years. It is the sixth largest consumer of the commodity, using an average of 3.78 million barrels per day. Following OPEC cuts, Saudi Arabia's oil output declined by 609,000 barrels per day from 2018 to 2019. It was slashed by a further 3.30 million BPD in 2020, following lower demand due to COVID-19. These production declines are cause for concern domestically, because oil production in Saudi Arabia is responsible for around 42% of the country's gross domestic product, GDP. 3. Russia. 11.49 million BPD. Russia was once the leading oil producer in the world, before it was overtaken by Saudi Arabia, and later the US. Overall production growth between 2018 and 2019 was less than 1% as OPEC and large Russian oil producers agreed to slow down production due to lower oil prices. Then, in early 2020, COVID-19 curbed output by up to 20%. The country's main extraction region is in western Siberia, from the Pryobskoye and Smotler fields. As of June 2020, Russia is the fifth largest consumer of oil, 3.31 million BPD, which accounts for about 4% of the world's total. 4. Canada. 5.50 million BPD. Canada is slowly climbing the list of leading oil producers, up from number 5, 2018, 5.29 million BPD, to number 4. Production is set to increase by more than 120% by 2050, surpassing the growth rate of all non-OPEC countries. Though the drastic increase in production may be expensive, as most of Canada's oil, 96%, comes from oil sands, the country has access to the technology to bring the cost down. Oil consumption in Canada is just over 2.4 million BPD and it has enough oil to last over 180 years at the current rate of consumption. Further plans for the future include expansion to trade agreements, which is expected to be concluded by December 2022. 5. China. 4.89 million BPD. China is the fifth largest producer of oil in the world, but it is the second largest consumer, using around 14 million barrels per day. This is one of the reasons why the market reacted so drastically to the drop in oil demand, more than 500,000 bpd, from China as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of China's domestic oil is extracted from the northeast and north-central region. Overall, oil production in China has dropped slowly and, at current production and consumption levels, it has about 5 years' worth of proven reserves. 6. Iraq. 4.74 million bpd. Between 2018 and 2019, Iraq's oil production increased by 2.6%, bringing output up to 4.74 million bpd. It holds around 9% of the world's oil reserves, which is more than 140 billion barrels. While it is only number 6 on the list of leading oil producers, it is the second largest of the OPEC countries. It is also the second largest exporter of the commodity, globally. Iraq's crude oil exports have doubled from 2 million bpd to 4 million bpd since 2010. Most of the oil is supplied to China, India, and Europe. 7. UAE. 4.01 million bpd. The third OPEC country on the list of leading oil producers is the United Arab Emirates, UAE. The last time the country produced more than 4 million bpd was in 2016, after which it dropped by 3.1%, 2017. At 98 billion barrels, the UAE's oil reserves have remained somewhat unchanged since 1988. At the current rate of production and consumption, this means the country has enough reserves to last almost 300 years. 8. Brazil. 3.67 million bpd. Brazil saw a significant increase in oil production from 2018 to 2019, and again in 2020. By December 2019, it was producing 3.10 million bpd, up by 0.52% from November 2019 and by 15.44% from the previous year. Like most oil-producing countries, Brazil's oil exports decreased in recent months, due to the lower global demand. The country holds less than 1% of the world's oil reserves, enough to last around 15 years. 9. Iran. 3.19 million bpd. In the 1970s, Iran exerted significant control over the oil industry, producing between 5 million and 6 million barrels of oil per day. As more and more countries started to produce and export oil, this number decreased drastically. Further decreases in production followed as the US imposed and toughened sanctions on Iran. Changing economic conditions have caused Iran to lower its oil revenue expectations from 29% of GDP in 2019 to just 9% for 2020. However, it remains committed to its investment in oil, with the aim of injecting $500 billion into the sector by 2025. 10. Kuwait. 2.94 million bpd. Kuwait's oil and gas production is responsible for more than half of its GDP and more than 90% of its exports revenue. The country had plans to boost its production levels to 4 million bpd in 2020, but growth has slowed down due to the global pandemic. Because Kuwait is so dependent on oil production to maintain its economic standing, it may need to find another industry to boost its revenue. The country's oil consumption at the end of 2019 was 339,000 barrels per day, down by 33%, from 451,000 in 2018.